Gravity. Invented in 1687 by Sir Isaac Newton, this theoretical construct has remained somewhat popular over the past couple hundred days, even being added into several popular video games, one of which being Terraria. And while Newton suggests that gravity should pull objects downwards, or more specifically pulling matter inwards to a central point, what if we were to not only disregard gravity entirely, but flip it on its theoretical head and fall up? Can we still beat Master-Mode Terraria given this rather peculiar challenge, or will we, simply put, fall short? Anyway, I hope you'll enjoy, and without any more waste of time, let's get into the video. Upon joining our OK, I kind of forgot I can't actually give a proper introduction to this world since we immediately start flying up into space. Interesting. Okay, so already we've come across the first major problem with this challenge, and that's that as soon as we join the world, we're immediately torn away from the green grass and luscious leaves and thrown straight into the stratosphere where we inevitably die to the ceiling of space. Because, as we all know, space has a ceiling. Now, the worst part about all of this is that respawning, well, it doesn't really do much to help us, seeing as we perpetually fall back up to space where we die over and over and over again. And honestly, it doesn't really appear as though there's anything that we can do, that we're perpetually stuck in this death cycle, and that this is kind of it, that we aren't able to make any progress, right? Well, not exactly. In fact, there's actually two separate ways that we can make progress in this world. The first of which being that if we're incredibly lucky, you might, and the word might is doing a lot of heavy lifting since I'm not even sure if this is even physically possible, but you might have a sky island / sky lake generate close enough to spawn where you can safely land on it, since cloud blocks negate all fall damage. From here, you just need to gather some resources and tower your way back up to the surface and start playing the game from there. Though, unfortunately, this wasn't the case in this world, meaning that we had to resort to Plan B, which is extremely time-consuming and especially mentally taxing. Okay, so you remember how literally a couple sentences ago I said that respawning doesn't really do much to help us since we perpetually fall back up to space where we die over and over and over again? Well, I wouldn't say that I lied about respawning not being all that helpful, since again, we immediately ascend to our zero gravity graves. However, whenever we do respawn, there's a couple frames where we're close enough to the surface to interact with it, whether it be to mine the dirt around us with our pickaxe, or if you're lucky like me, you can chop down a tree with your axe so long as it generates essentially directly on top of your spawn. But again, we only have a couple frames where we can do so, meaning that I could only get a single good swing in with my axe before I had to wait a mind-numbingly, excruciatingly long 15.5 seconds to fall to my death, not to mention having to wait an entire 15 more seconds just to respawn, just to, get this, get a single swing in on the tree with my copper axe, a tool that's already well renowned for being extremely slow in a normal run where gravity is universally recognized as a law. Now, I pride myself for being a somewhat patient person. I mean, I would expect myself to be patient considering the fact that I completed a world essentially without a world, but having to wait a whole 30 seconds just to hit a tree a singular time was really testing my mental fortitude and willpower to not cave in and answer the call of the void. But finally, after an entire 10.5 minutes of falling into space, along with another 20 deaths, I finally managed to get my hands on the first couple blocks of the run. Yes! I got wood! Finally! Unfortunately, even though we finally got ourselves some blocks, our torment was not quite over, since we still had to stop ourselves from, falling up into space. So I went ahead and crafted myself a couple platforms, which did absolutely nothing to stop us from falling up since you can't actually walk on the underside of platforms. Something which may not be all that much of a problem for us right now, but will certainly be quite annoying later on when we have to fight bosses. But we'll burn that bridge when we get there. However, now that there was a platform placed on the tree, I was able to place a block underneath, or technically on top of the platform depending on which way you're looking at things, and finally ended what felt like an eternity of dying, and we can finally make some progress in the world. Right? Okay, so because it took me so long to finally get a hold on some blocks, it had already become night, and well, as you just saw, this ended up being a bit of a problem to say the very least. And while I was eventually able to kill off all the zombies and actually secure my wooden box, this ordeal took me from a starting point of 23 deaths all the way up to 34, making this by far the most painful start I've ever had in any playthrough. Anyway, now that we were finally truly safe from all the outside horrors, it was time to start gathering some resources. And while I would normally explore the surface for chests, caves, and potentially some sky islands, that was clearly off the table for this run for reasons I think are pretty self-explanatory. So with no other option, I grabbed my pickaxe and started mining, which considering that we fall upwards meant that making a elevator, well, it wasn't really possible, especially since we can't walk on the underside of platforms. However, one positive thing about mining is that there's really not much of a difference other than the fact that we have to mine upwards rather than down, since caves are just caves regardless of what gravitational orientation you're looking from, except for the fact that it was really weird seeing slimes and pots on the ceiling, along with minecart tracks, which, by the way, I did try to ride, but apparently and honestly, pretty unsurprisingly, was unable to do so. While mining, I managed to actually come across a pyramid of all things, and while the sandstorm in a bottle is widely accepted to be the best possible item to get from the chest, I was actually kind of hoping for a flying carpet since this item could potentially enable me to explore the surface of the world. And because of this, I assume that you can understand my pure excitement and joy when I saw that I had, in fact, gotten a flying carpet, and then also understand my agony when I realized that I'm just not allowed to have nice things in this world, since just like walking on the underside of platforms and riding upside down minecarts, using a flying carpet whilst upside down is just straight up not possible, and since this accessory didn't even have any modifiers, it was literally just a waste of space. Thank you, Relogic. Alright, now, I understand the video has already been playing for several minutes at this point, and I've yet to get essentially any proper progress done, but there's just a lot of smaller details from this challenge that add up over time, making this challenge as unique and difficult as it is. And I want to show as many of these details as possible. For example, on my way out of the pyramid, two slimes decided to jump me, which normally wouldn't be an issue since slimes are quite easy to deal with. However, with reverse gravity, they were very easily able to overpower me and took all my lunch money before sending me right back to spawn. And since there was no way I was going to let myself lose 12 gold to a couple of slimes, I decided to head back to get my revenge, sparking a rivalry which would take out the next 11.5 minutes of my life, along with adding 5 deaths to my running total. The reason I wanted to bring this up is not because fighting 2 slimes and getting absolutely destroyed by them 5 times is all that entertaining, but rather because it perfectly highlights the fact that even the most simple tasks, such as fighting slimes, becomes so much more difficult when the slightest things have been tweaked, throwing years of muscle memory right out the window. For example, with normal gravity, I would be able to get somewhat close to the slimes and hold them at a distance with my copper short sword, but with reverse gravity, and more specifically because I was on the ceiling, John Pythagorean theorem himself made it so that I couldn't reach the slimes at the normal distance I was accustomed to, forcing me to get closer, and in turn making me more susceptible to getting the late 90s, early 2000s Nickelodeon experience. But in a desperate attempt to keep my retention graph from plummeting further than it already has, I'm going to stop myself for now and focus more on the actual progression of the world. For example, after getting my money back, I managed to craft myself a sapphire grappling hook, which thankfully is actually functional, unlike quite literally everything else I've attempted thus far. Now that I'd gotten myself a grappling hook, I decided to make a scuffed version of a elevator, since again, we can't make a proper one, which has absolutely zero flaws in the slightest, and went perfectly without any problems, requiring me to grapple onto the wall and onto platforms in a later revised version in order to make my way up into the mines. And speaking of mines, I decided to take a bit of time and do a bit of spelunking, where I managed to find a bunch of loot such as Hermes boots, more Hermes boots, shoe spikes, another pair of shoe spikes, a flare gun, a cloud bottle, which surprisingly actually works. I'm not actually sure why I was surprised by another cloud bottle, a mace, boy I sure hope it's not another flippers, which actually made mining not all that bad, a bunch of life crystals along with a bunch of platinum, which I would later use to make a full set of armor, a platinum bow, along with a diamond staff. Also, while mining, I of course had to die at least once in a really embarrassing manner due to forgetting the whole, gravity reversal thing. Wow! What? You gotta be kidding me. That's just a scam. If I died to a dart trap, I think I would have deserved it, because I'm not allowed to be on the ground normally. you know, where pressure plates are, so that would have just been really embarrassing. Lastly, to conclude our mining expedition, I managed to come across a skeleton merchant who is selling some dungy old umbrellas, which I'm not going to question why anyone would want umbrellas this far underground, and while I bought this item initially as a joke, it for some reason works completely fine. Oh, that's so good, dude. The umbrellas, okay. We are literally set to search the surface now. We've got an umbrella, grappling hook, cloud in a bottle. Like, that combination, we're never falling up into the sky again unless it's on purpose. So, having said that, I went ahead and decided to properly explore the surface of my world for the first ever time. And let me just say, it felt so liberating being able to get out of the mines and enjoy a fresh of breath air. Oh my god, it's so beautiful being able to explore the world. Oh, it took me almost 4 hours to get to the point where I can explore the surface. Like, look at this map. Look at this map, yeah? All of the map was down here pretty much. And, I mean, of course, up here when, you know, I was falling, but we don't talk about that. Oh, wait, hold up. Snow biome, snow biome. Yes, yes, yes. We can get ice, and then we can get the frost burn arrows, you know? Or we can just fall up into this. Okay. Okay, dude. So much for, never falling up into the sky again unless it was planned. So after returning to the snow biome for a second time to collect ice for some frostburn arrows, I decided to explore the left of the world for a bit, where I came across a wooden chest containing an item I would quite literally use until the end of the run. A legendary umbrella. Oh my, I will take that, even though it's like literally no difference. I want it because it's funny. That's right, another umbrella. Anyway, with all my new gear, I finally felt that I was ready to fight the Eye of Cthulhu, though I was honestly a little bit worried about what, if anything about this fight, would change due to the reversed gravity, and there were a couple of things in particular that I was rather worried about going into this fight, but first, I needed to figure out how to make my arena in the first place. Now, normally I would just make a long platform out of, well, platforms, since this would allow me to fall and attack underneath should I need to, but considering that I can't actually walk on platforms, this meant that I would need to walk on solid blocks. So I went ahead and made a long platform in the sky that I could walk on. This, of course, presents another problem that I will talk about during the fight itself, but unfortunately that fight won't happen tonight since I got a blood moon and just didn't want to take the risk. So after AFKing the entire night, I decided to take the opportunity to see if we could skip some time by sleeping in a bed, which, considering the fact that we weren't able to ride upside down minecarts nor use the flying carpet, I felt that this simply wouldn't be possible. Right? Oh my. Oh. I was not expecting that to happen. I didn't even know if I was gonna be able to sleep or not. It looks like, is time increasing? I don't know if time's speeding by or not. It's hard to tell. While I wouldn't really consider this to be, well, sleeping on the bed, it did in fact speed up time, though I wouldn't be asleep for long before I was visited by your favorite man in blue who sells everything other than the items needed by you, which I am legally obligated to talk to for the very rare chance that he might sell my signature blue chicken pet. Okay, now that I'm done eating what I was eating, I can finally speak normally. I was telling myself it'd be really funny if there was a blue chicken egg in the first traveling merchant that I had in this world. And guess what? There is. I am so happy. Goodbye, eucalyptus sap. I'm not going to sell you just because. But, oh man, it's so good. I have my blue chicken already. Welcome, blue chicken. Welcome. You are going to have a very interesting time being upside down, but hello. Anyway, now that I had my trusty blue chicken by my side, I headed back to bed to sleep the day away, and when the moon started to peek under the horizon, I raised my suspicious looking eye to the ground and started the first true fight of the world. Going into this fight, there honestly wasn't much that was changed due to the reversed gravity, something I'm somewhat grateful for since I'd been worrying about this quite a bit as I'd mentioned earlier. Of course, I had to take a while to recalibrate and get accustomed to having essentially shimmer arrows, but since the Eye of Cthulhu doesn't have block collision and flies anywhere and wherever, the only other major change from this fight is that there were plenty of moments where I physically was unable to attack the boss because of our solid platform, which is actually the thing I feared the most since there is technically a time limit to this fight. Now, the reason the solid platform was going to be as big of a problem as it was is because the Eye of Cthulhu often spends a lot of time hovering above the player, and since this mechanic doesn't rely on the player's perspective, this meant that the Eye was spending a lot of time below us, which in turn meant that none of my attacks were able to deal damage for a significant portion of the fight. However, I had clearly overestimated the amount of time the Eye would spend below the arena and was able to quickly enter the second phase, which was almost completely indistinguishable from a normal playthrough. Dodging, of course, was also made more difficult throughout the entire fight, seeing as I couldn't rely on dropping downwards as I typically do to evade the onslaught of attacks, but after several minutes along with the power of spamming projectiles, we finally managed to defeat the oversized Eye, not only securing us our first victory in the world, but granting us the Shield of Cthulhu along with a bunch of Crimtane, both of which being vital items in my conquest to conquer this challenge. With the Eye of Cthulhu defeated, I set my sights on the next boss in progression, the Brain of Cthulhu. Though with essentially no upgrades to our gear other than the tendon bow, I knew that this fight was going to be a challenge, with my main fear once again being the inability to attack through a solid platform. Not wanting to waste any time, since again this video already had such a slow start, I rushed over to the right of the world in order to find the Crimson, and after surveying the area, I started to form a plan. Okay, so I've got an idea. Normally when I fight the Brain of Cthulhu, I do so on multiple platforms, and typically, so normally what I do is I'd have like a normal platform layer here, I made like another one here, and then I'd stand on this bottom one and jump up if needed. The problem is that I can't really do that. Even if I make a platform layer here, actually no, I don't want to make the platform layer here because I'll be standing on this side. So I'd have to make the platform here, but if I'm standing technically below the platform, then the brain might spawn above. So now I have a solid line to stand on, yeah? But then what I can do, also that spider, what the heck was that? But now what I can do, yeah, is I can build platforms here, and now I can't stand on them, because again, you cannot stand on the underside of platforms. But you can still grapple to them. And what I'm considering is if I should just, these stupid spiders, every single time I want to try to make a point, they have to get in the way. I might actually need to make it closer due to my inability of having proper reach. Or even what we could do is we could build a second layer of platforms, and then we can just grapple to the different layers. So yeah, okay, the plan right now is this. We have one solid line, one solid platform that we can walk on. And since we can't walk on the underside of the platforms, we're instead going to have to grapple to them and kind of just have to move around the arena this way. It's not perfect, but it's honestly the best thing that we have, since we can't really fight the Brain of Cthulhu while standing here, because on the game side, the Brain's going to try to stay above us. Hi, Editor Crispylink here. I just wanted to quickly clarify that the Brain of Cthulhu can teleport in any random direction during the fight, but from personal experience, the Brain teleports above me the most often, hence why this was such a major concern prior to the fight. That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to make this very clear. Okay. For the record, I don't have, like, even the slightest hope for this fight. I just want to see what we're getting into. That way we can better prepare ourselves for when we actually do stand a chance. But, anyway, yeah, let's give this a go, I guess. During the first phase of this fight, I elected to use a combination of my tendon bow with jester arrows and my diamond staff to take down all the creepers. And while trying to use my scuffed arena to dodge was in fact rather difficult, I was fortunate enough to always have the brain and in turn the creepers to linger around the center of the arena, allowing me to pretty easily enter the second phase. Once I entered the second phase of the fight, I decided to swap out my jester arrows for my frostburn arrows to better identify the real brain. And while this was working with some level of success, not being able to easily traverse around my arena caused me to not only get hit a bunch, but I even managed to get cornered towards the very end of the fight. However, with hardly any life keeping me alive, I managed to lock in and somehow defeated the Brain of Cthulhu against all odds. Yes! I didn't even think that we were going to stand a chance for this fight. We ended up beating him first try. That's crazy. Oh my, okay. Okay, okay. I'm surprised how that turned out. I mean, it got close at times, but the fact that we even stood a chance, let alone beat the boss, that's crazy. I was not expecting that in the slightest. I'm sorry. How did we win that? Anyway, now that the Brain of Cthulhu was defeated, we could finally upgrade our gear prior to starting the next fight. Skeletron. So after opening our treasure bag, and also in turn getting the Brain of Confusion, I went ahead and crafted both the Magiluminescence and Deathbringer pickaxe, which might not sound like much, but with an upgraded pickaxe, I returned back to my mines to finish off the Elevator. Except before I could actually do anything, I was made well aware that the goblins had decided to invade my world, and even though I hate taking out 7 mortgages to reforge a singular accessory, I figured it would still be worth it in the end. So after I slowly made my way back down to the surface, because I took the time to widen and overall improve my elevator for future use, I swiftly killed off all the goblins from the comfort of my home before heading back to hell to mine a ton of hellstone, which after mining some obsidian along with finding the goblin stinkerer, I crafted myself a full set of molten armor, molten pickaxe, molten fury, imp staff, and even a volcano for good measure. I also then went ahead and upgraded my Hermes boots to Spectre boots, which made exploring the surface of the world so much more enjoyable. However, there was no time to relax and appreciate all of our progress thus far, since I wanted to fight Skeletron tonight. And with the day already half gone, I had to quickly construct an arena comprising of a solid platform to walk on, along with a platform, which I could then grapple onto in order to loop around the boss. And once my arena was built, I waited a little bit longer for the sun to fall above the horizon before summoning Skeletron. Okay, wonderful start. An amazing start to the fight, yep. Now, even without considering that absolutely fantastic start of a fight, Skeletron was by far the most annoying boss up to this point, because even though all of these 3 past bosses, that being the Eye of Cthulhu, Brain of Cthulhu, and now Skeletron don't have block collision, Skeletron spends a lot more time hovering technically above the player than any of the other 2 bosses, spending roughly 14 seconds hiding behind my solid platform for every roughly 7 seconds he was above. And since this fight has, just like the Eye of Cthulhu, a time limit, having the boss be essentially invulnerable for 2/3 of the fight was not what I would consider ideal, especially when you have to take down both of Skeletron's hands before you can start dealing any considerable damage to the main boss in the first place. That being said, dodging Skeletron's hands wasn't all that difficult, and after exactly 3 minutes of fighting, we managed to take them both down, where I then learned that Skeletron's homing skulls not only despawn when coming in contact with solid blocks, but if there isn't a clear line of sight on the player, the skulls just won't spawn at all, allowing you to not only cheese this fight, but to stand still and regenerate a little bit of health in the process. Of course, considering what I said earlier about there being a time limit to the fight, I opted not to abuse this mechanic and instead forced Skeletron to stay above the arena by grappling onto the platform, and after spending a couple more minutes chipping away at Skeletron's health, was finally able to pulverize the calcium deficient guardian, granting us access to the dungeon. With only the wall of flesh standing in the way between us and hard mode, I knew that I was going to need to upgrade my gear one last time, and the dungeon was the perfect place to start as I was able to get myself several items such as the Blue Moon, Magic Missile along with the Shadow Key, Aqua Scepter, a slightly better Blue Moon along with the Muramasa, and since I already had the Volcano, I decided to do something I haven't done in a very long time and make myself the Knight's Edge. So after ransacking the jungle for stingers, vines, and jungle spores, I returned back to spawn to craft both the Blood Butcher along with the Blade of Grass, where I then traveled to the left in a desperate bid to find a closer Crimson. But ultimately, there was no Crimson on the left, and I had to head all the way back to the right to finally craft the Knight's Edge, which I ironically wouldn't even use against the Wall of Flesh, though found much greater use in hard mode as you'll see later on. But for now, I return back to Hell in order to start making a long platform for the Wall of Flesh, but for some reason, every time I try getting anything done in this place, the game decides to start a world event, and this time, it was a slime rain. Now, considering that I had yet to actually fight King Slime in this world, I was honestly looking forward to fighting this boss, especially since it was going to be the first boss I fought with actual collision physics. So after returning back to the surface, I proceeded to spend a couple minutes killing slimes before finally spawning in King Slime. Where was King Slime? Hello? Sir? So all of that was for nothing? I just wasted time. What the heck? I want a refund. Now, even though King Slime had vanished into thin air, the slime rain continued, and I figured it could be possible to get a second boss to spawn, since I'm pretty sure, though not 100% certain, that I've been able to fight 2 King Slimes in a single slime rain in the past. So instead of getting right back to work making my bridge, I spent the next 8 minutes desperately trying to kill enough slimes to get a second boss to spawn, only to, well, be left completely disappointed. So after lamenting over lost time, which in turn ended up wasting even more time, I mined a bunch of stone in order to expand my platform, and once I used up all my blocks, I realized I didn't actually have any money to reforge at the Goblin Stinker. However, after looting a couple shadow chests, I accumulated a little over 2 platinum, which I then immediately lost trying to reforge my gear. Wonderful. Anyway, after dealing with another goblin army along with a blood moon immediately afterwards, because, of course, I was finally ready to fight the Wall of Flesh. Finally, I can fight the Wall of Flesh. It just took me a long time. The guide's still not here. I forgot about that slight detail. Whoopsies. Let me guess, all the housing's also full. I have to make more houses, don't I? Oh my god. Finally the guide's here, I can fight the Wall of Flesh. Okay, guide, I know you were only here for like 3 seconds, but, goodbye. Going into this fight, I honestly didn't think there would be any changes caused by having reversed gravity, and while that was mostly correct, it honestly felt as though the eye lasers were aiming a little below where I actually was, as if the game thought I was standing on the other side of the platform. You know, where I would have been had I had normal gravity. Of course, this didn't mean that it was impossible to get hit by the eye lasers, since I managed to do just that quite often, but it definitely made dodging attacks much easier. In terms of actually dealing damage, I opted to use weapons with piercing due to, well, all the hungries, mainly using my Molten Fury with Jester's arrows along with my Diamond Staff, though I did occasionally swap out my Jester's arrows for Hellfire whenever I felt that I could get consistent, clear shots on the main boss in order to deal high DPS. And sure enough, I was very quickly bringing the wall's health closer and closer to 0. That was until I ran out of platforms and died literally seconds away from entering hard mode. Having gotten so close to beating the wall on my very first attempt, I immediately headed back to hell for a rematch, and just like the fight prior, I was making very quick work on the wall's health using a barrage of arrows, and also just like the previous fight, I was quickly running out of space. However, through sheer determination, and also just outright having a lot more health this time around, I managed to pull through and defeated the Wall of Flesh, officially bringing us into hard mode. Now, I had run a poll on both my YouTube channel and community Discord server somewhat recently, and you, the viewers, made it very clear that you'd rather not watch videos that are too incredibly long. So while I'll be ending this video here, if you're interested in watching the other half of this challenge, please consider subscribing to the channel along with turning on the notification bell to be notified when part 2 comes out. That is, of course, if it hasn't already been released by the time you're watching this. Plus, I'm trying to reach 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and not only does every subscriber bring me closer to this goal, but subscribing tells YouTube that maybe, just maybe, my channel is worthy enough to be pushed out to other people just like you who might like the kind of content that I make. Anyway, thank you again so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.